Isaac Asimov and George Orwell wrote the two most important works of speculative fiction to be published in the 1940s. The Foundation trilogy, serialized from 1942 to 50, is a far-future space opera, exploring the potential of humankind and its capacity to overcome the collapse of a galactic empire. 1984, however, published in 1948, is a near-future dystopia in which Great Britain has come under the hand of a totalitarian superstate. Its methods of brainwashing are so extreme and effective that its subjects have literally no chance of launching a successful revolution, making it one of the darkest worlds in speculative fiction. Isaac Asimov took major issue with Orwell's pessimism, as well as other features of the novel, and wrote one of its few negative reviews for the Field newspaper syndicate. He divides his article into 4 segments: the writing, the science fiction, the government, and the international situation of 1984, each of which will be explored in this video. Asimov summarizes the book as an attempt to show what life would be like in a world of total evil, in which those controlling the government kept themselves in power by brute force, by distorting the truth, by continually rewriting history, by mesmerizing the people generally. He found it ridiculous that this future should come to be so soon, with middle-aged people at the time of writing experiencing it in their old age. He also took issue with Orwell as a writer, since he was born into the upper middle class, and compared him to the hippies of the 60s, taking a stance against governments as a way of easing their conscience. The book was apparently written when tensions had eased with the Soviets, and so he regards an attack on their system of government as somewhat opportunistic. Asimov's biggest issue with the book, however, seems to be the prose itself. He describes it as dreadfully dull, didactic, and repetitious, adding that Orwell's imminent death at the time of writing may have added to the bitterness of the book. He views the characters as bland, and makes the fairly accurate prediction that 1984 would become used by conservatives to attack government expansion. Though 1984 is generally regarded as a science fiction novel, Asimov asserts that this isn't the case. He accuses Orwell of having no feel for the future, and rather than speculating on the trajectory of Great Britain, merely changing the details of life in Stalinist Moscow. His essay calls out the laziness of transforming Leon Trotsky into Emmanuel Goldstein, and modelling Big Brother on Stalin. It goes on to accuse this totalitarian state of being ill-conceived, as its surveillance technology somehow works perfectly in a dilapidated London. There's also the paradox of everyone being watched at all times, including the Watchers. Asimov puts these incongruities down to a lack of imagination. He says that Orwell was unable to conceive of robots or computers or even credit files. His hero, writes Asimov, finds it difficult in his world of 1984 to get shoelaces or razor blades. So would I in the real world of the 1980s, for so many people use slip-on shoes and electric razors. Neither does Orwell conceive of new vices. His characters are all gin hounds and tobacco addicts. Asimov complains that he could have included marijuana, synthetic hallucinogens, or at least some new vices. Orwell is apparently writing a distorted nostalgia for a time that never was. This is as much a problem for Asimov as Orwell's characters being vice-filled. He portrayed humanity overcoming obstacles in his own work, and stated that there have always been brave men and women who have withstood the tyrants to the death, and whose personal histories are luminous flames in the surrounding darkness. Asimov seems to view Orwell as naive about the potential grip of dictators. He points out that despite ruling with an iron fist, Hitler's reign of terror ended 6 years after invading Poland. Mussolini was overthrown, and Franco's death would be all it took for fascism to dwindle in Spain. Maoism also went on to diminish with the demise of its namesake. Asimov considers Orwell's focus on Stalin as too narrow for a fully realised vision of the future. He said that if anything, in fact, governments of the 1980s seemed dangerously weak. The advance of technology has put powerful weapons, explosives, machine guns, fast cars, into the hands of urban terrorists, who can and do kidnap, hijack, gun down, and take hostages with impunity, while governments stand by more or less helplessly. He goes on to criticise Newspeak, the state's attempt to inhibit thought by constricting language as impractical. Political obfuscation has tended to use many words rather than few, long words rather than short, to extend rather than to reduce. Every leader of inadequate education or limited intelligence hides behind exuberant inebriation of loquacity. The one compliment Asimov actually does give Orwell is his foresight to envision the world dividing into 3 main superpowers. China and Russia do not form a single monolith, but remain deadly enemies, in opposition to Britain and America. He credits Orwell's left-leaning politics with him avoiding the superstition to see leftists as unified and indistinguishable villains. He knew they would fight each other as fiercely over the most trifling points of doctrine as would the most pious of Christians. Orwell's mistake, however, which is apparently the most laughable in the book, was to envision a permanent state of war as necessary to maintain the balance of power. The point of conflict in 1984 is to diminish resources and maintain the social stratification of the middle, upper and lower classes. Asimov points out that war has declined since 1945, and so has the availability of oil. There has also been an ongoing threat of war, rather than war itself, which has been enough to secure military investment and the maintaining of a status quo. Asimov further regards the rewriting of history as unnecessary. The Japanese, despite being enemies of the US, were allies by the 50s. Orwell's world of 1984 appears to be an endless extension of the 40s, with London hit by bombs, similar to those used during the Blitz in lieu of nuclear weapons. Asimov effectively reduces 1984 to an implausible attack on Stalinism. One may be inclined to accuse him of jealousy, since it remains the best-selling work of dystopian fiction, is undoubtedly an engaging and thought-provoking novel, and remains as relevant today as it was in 1948. Some of Asimov's criticisms come off as petty, since Orwell had no pretension of being a science fiction writer and was deliberately mirroring his times. These attacks are easy to understand when you consider that Asimov viewed 1984 as dangerous literature. He writes that if the world was to go communist, it would be in a fashion quite different from that depicted in 1984, and if we try to prevent the eventuality by imagining that 1984 is accurate, then we'll be defending ourselves against assaults from the wrong direction, and we will lose. Asimov, in his Foundation series and other works, envisioned problems with solutions, and saw technology as a way of overcoming them. His faith in progress never wavered, inspiring many of today's physicists and engineers. Science fiction was for him a way of maintaining the reader's faith in humankind, and a way of guiding his audience to a better tomorrow.